A city of brick and brass, streets soiled with blood, and a pub full of adventure. This is the events of a bartender. The sun shone brightly that day, like a beacon of light shining on the open stretch wilderness and farmland, reflecting back off the river's water, then piercing into the window of the moving train. And in that carriage is where our story begins. Dear Journal, it's been a peaceful ride so far. The trains have been running smoother than I had ever expected them to. Being my first time travelling on one of the newer models, of course. I've rather enjoyed the smooth journey. I'd never realised just how far out from the city my little village was. We've travelled quite far indeed. Not that Lizzie would know that. I tried to wake her in hopes of seeing these beautiful settings, but our stop will be coming up soon, so I'll let her sleep for now. Lazy little sweetheart. I'll write again when possible, to give an update on our new life. Sincerely yours, Nicholas Elkwood. The train continued down the tracks for another 10 minutes or so, when finally coming to a stop with a bellowing whistle of steam and smoke, blinding the curious young man peering out the carriage window. Once it cleared, Nicholas's eyes widened. Whoa! At the sight before his eyes, the hustle and bustle of busy men wearing black suits and bowler hats running back and forth, bumping into one another, clutching briefcases in their hands, ignoring the marvel of architectural beauty above them. The ceiling rose above the brick-laid floor, forming a stained glass dome supported by structures of crimson brick and brass, creating the building's look of wealth, but also having the industrial feel. Nicholas stood from his seat, reaching up and taking down his heavy brown leather case from the shelf above his head, a lift with a little bit of struggle, but he was fine, proving itself more difficult to move than it was to get up there. The trunk now down, he turned to his table, packing his belongings, including his writing journal, a pencil, a half-eaten bag of fruit-flavoured sweets, and lastly, a strange-looking red and gold accented book. After placing these items into his knapsack, he picked up the still sleeping Lizzie, placing her in his left pocket, and with a slight spring in his step, he headed out of the train door and into the new, exciting life of the city. Stepping off the train, through a gust of steam from the train's tracks, Nicholas's vision blurred as his eyes tried to adjust to the new light levels of the station. His eyes widened to take in awe at the stupendous architecture of the station's walls and roof, when all of a sudden his gaze was broken by the sound of the train's whistle, indicating the trains were beginning to leave. Nicholas then starts his trek off the platform, only to take a few steps before being knocked down to the brickworked floor by the bustling herd of people all heading for the trains. As Nicholas falls to the ground, his orientation lost briefly, then realizing his knapsack is nowhere to be seen. A quick panic until he notices it on the floor, his belongings scattered across the station. The ground was littered. He scrambled along to his scattered items. Soon enough, they were all back safely in his bag. However, as he lastly checked his bag, he noticed something was missing. His journal, he thought. He took another quick survey of the floor around him, and then he saw it. Relieved, he leant over to pick it up, when out of nowhere, a short, rat-like man snatched up the book and continued his escape through the busy crowd of the station. Stop! Nicholas pointed towards the fleeing man, continuing his escape, ducking and diving out through the crowds of workers and businessmen. only then to look back, making sure his crimes were not being followed, when he was abruptly caught by the back of his neck. Then to look down, seeing his feet hang off the ground.
So, Benny, picking on my newest employee, are we?
A tall, older-looking man with greying black hair exclaimed. Benny's face now stopped from shock to now the face of panic, realizing it was that he had been stopped. Realizing that who had stopped his escape only before being lifted up to the face of a well-dressed, stern-looking gentleman, and then looking towards the direction of his captor, the one he was mostly afraid of seeing. His fears were justified, seeing a younger-looking woman of dark brown shoulder-blade length hair, wearing a dark brownish shirt and smart black trousers, ending in what can only be described as militant boots, with small hearts embroidered on each one. Benny's voice squealed to a cut-off from the tightening of his top around his throat. Looking up in fear from the dark leather gloves up the long-sleeved shirt, his eyes then met with the eyes coated of dark hazel colours, clearly showing the sturdy glare of what can only be said to be a pissed-off bull. After regaining his composure and scurrying to his feet, Nicholas finally regained his footing to give haste to the crook, only to be stopped, seeing him held off the floor by his shirt collar, walking sheepishly over to the two people holding his thief off the ground. As he approached, he heard an older, gruff-sounding voice.
Hey! Kid! Yeah, you! Get over it! Get over it! Come on! Yes, you, kid! Come on, over here! While still young, come on!
The man says, pointing at Nicholas. Both the elderly-looking man and girl look at one another, and the girl gives the man the look of, "These are new gloves I'm wearing." Seeing this as a sign, he sighs, and in his grizzled voice, he speaks.
Alright, Benny.
The book. Then we drop you. Okay?
A sigh of relief washed over Benny's face as he fumbled through his pockets, bringing out the red and gold book, nearly dropping it from his nerves. As soon as the book was given to the man, he was dropped to the floor in a heap. He then looked up, only to see those same eyes he saw when being grappled. And seeing that, he scurried away faster than any rat I've ever seen.
Sorry you had to see that, kid. Not really the best first impression of the big city now, was it? But, so, now that that's out of the way, what do you say about we get down to the business of introductions, hey?
Losing his serious-looking face and replacing it with one much more calm and thoughtful, Nicholas thought, now looking in confusion at the two people who had just saved his book. Do I know these people? He thought.
Well, you see, kid, I'm your new employer. You can call me. Oh my foot!
The older man stopped, moaning in pain after being interrupted by a stamp on his foot.
Enough blabbering, will you? Good to meet you. Name's Abby.
She exclaimed, now shaking Nicholas's hand, more professionally than her employer tried to before. after the introductions were said and done. The three still remembered that they were standing right in the centre of a busy train station. After that realization, the three started to move to the brass outlined archway that was the exit. Nicholas went to pick up his case, only to see it being picked up for him. He darted his gaze from the ground to see lifting his heavy case with much more ease than Nicholas could ever struggle to manage. He saw Abby lifting it. Witnessing just a small example of this girl's strength firsthand, he could easily tell she was not one to get on the bad side of. Nicholas clutched his satchel, making sure it wouldn't fly open again, as he followed his new companions towards the exit. He stopped at the first sight of sunlight, blinding him momentarily before he set his sights on the open blue sky, sitting in perfect contrast with the red bricks and the metallical brass city. The streets filled with long roads running through buildings and narrow lanes, splitting apart but then connecting again. Automobiles driving on the road of all different sizes and shapes. Small two-seaters, large trucks carrying supply shipments and sales goods. People running around on the grave pavemented walkways that work their way throughout the city. His gaze broken from a small pebble hitting him on the head. He swung his head towards the direction it came from, seeing that Abby had thrown it off the edge of an automobile where the boss was sitting in the driver's seat. The automobile was white with silver accents. It stood out like a sore thumb. It elongated at its front end, showing off such a powerful engine it must have. A black grilled front and a black roof, built with its contrasted colour scheme. The area at the back big enough to hold at least a good 6 people. The city was vast, the streets filled with many different looking people. Merchants, businessmen, mechanics, and strange white-robed people crowding around one of the largest buildings Nicholas had ever seen. Standing tall over the surrounding building, with the greying walls surrounded with its white bricks and gold filigree, making it stand out amongst the red and brass of the city. The building was soon out of sight, as did the pristine white shimmer of the vehicle's metal shell. And the sunlight faded as they proceeded down an off-roadway leading into a more shadowed atmosphere. The road continued for some time before Nicholas heard the gruff voice that he now connected to his new employer.
Oh, ain't she a sight for sore eyes? There she is. There be the old girl. We're almost there.
Nicholas gazed out the window of the automobile, seeing the point in the road where 2 intersecting pavements meet, forming a crossroads. Upon one of the corners stood a large, old-looking building, still keeping in the main colour scheme of the city, having the red bricks and brass detailing worked into the outside. What set this building apart, though, was the fact that it looked much older than the buildings around it. The bricks in the walls were either broken or downright missing altogether. The brass elements had lost their shine, and the slanted roof rim had many loose shingles and tiles leading onto the flat roof. The first thing that sets this building apart from the rest, other than its age, was a large sign above 2 wooden doors, hanging there in the shape of a large bird with its wings set backwards, and the words "The Old Rook" written on the sign. The vehicle was now parked, and the 3 making their way to the entrance of the building, when the older man, Nicholas now knowing to call him boss, turned around.
Now, look, listen. I know what you saw back at the station was a bit unorthodox. But what you gotta remember is that here We run a respectable business. And above all, we are professionals.
He says in his rusty voice as he pushes the building's grand mahogany doors open.
Seriously, I've told you 1,000 times, Kathy, keep your hands off my equipment.
Yelled a somewhat younger sounding male voice.
I mean, come on, why do you always find it necessary to mess with my stuff?
Well, Vincent, isn't it obvious? I was trying to see all those pretty pictures you take on your time off. I know you should be more open to these things, because I bet the new girl is going to be interested too.
What makes you think we're getting a girl? From what I've heard, we're getting a new bartender, so I bet he's going to be a lot like Owen.
Oh, are you still going on about that? Owen's gone. Get over it. And you better hope the boss doesn't catch you talking about him.
Well, looky here, little Miss Rulebreaker, finally playing by the rules. What are you trying to do? Screw the boss?
Ugh! No way. I might not be picky, but even I have some standards.
Their heads now quickly turning back, facing the bar's stage, and with the look of pure fear on their faces, be completely aware they are still in earshot of everyone that has just come in.
Shit! How much do you think he heard?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe everything? Oh, God, we're so dead. Maybe we could run for it, hide in our rooms, and walk down in an hour like nothing ever happened.
Kathy quickly agreed, and then together,
1, 2, 3. Ow! 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 Ow!
both of them start wailing, now having their earlobes twisted and pulled by the brown leather gloves of the nightmare they both feared the most. Not the boss. Abby, dragged by their ears, excruciating pain suddenly stopped as they are both dropped to the floor in front of a tall, stern-faced older man. That is, their boss. Looking down on them with piercing dark, coal-like eyes, with the face of what they thought to be a demon, when suddenly...
Vincent? Catherine?
The boss's voice boomed like thunder as his icy glare struck their confidence, when out of nowhere came...
Seriously, oh, you two should have seen your faces. Oh, it's priceless. Too good. Just too good. It's good. Duh.
The boss bellowed with laughter. Vincent and Catherine both looked at each other with sighs of relief. Over both their faces, and slow smiles and chuckles now sparking up between them. Abby looking on at the situation, rolling her eyes in disapproval. And all this time, Nicholas still standing there in confusion over the whole of the events that have just transpired in front of him. After that, the room fell silent. For a bit, until a loud crash from the kitchen caught the attention of everyone. Nicholas's face rapidly changed from one of confusion to one of shock and then one of concern, while everyone else strangely stayed completely calm, as if this was normal, until Vincent uttered out,
Julie's home.
They all made their way into the kitchen. As they entered, they came to find a young girl, no older than about 18, with creamy brown hair, had fallen on the floor. Paper bags of shopping spilled their contents across the floor beside her, with a chair lying on top of her.
I'm fine. Don't worry. This happens a lot.
Julie Julie states, sitting up and rubbing her head from the embarrassment she had just suffered. When out of nowhere she jumps up to her feet and stretched her hand out, proclaiming,
Oh, you must be the new guy. It's a pleasure to meet you. Oops.
She manages to utter out before tripping over the shopping still scattered over the floor. As she fell, in a split second, Nicholas moved into her falling path, only to catch her before she hit the floor, leaving everybody in the room in a state of surprise at Nicholas's reaction speeds. Impressed, they hear Catherine say,
Oh my, cute and a gentleman. I might have a new favourite.
She says before looking at Vincent with a flirty smile and saying,
No offence, Vincent.
Hey, at least it keeps me out of your fantasies. I'm good, you bimbo.
No. Vincent replied humorously, chuckling to himself. Catherine, now fixating her flirtatious eyes back onto Nicholas, with a huff from Vincent's remark, beginning to say,
Oh, don't worry about him, sweetie. He's just jealous of you getting all my attention. And I do mean all of it.
She finishes helping Julie out of Nicholas's grip, and now.
All right, you two, stop your bickering. It's been a long day. Quite frankly, I can't put up with you two right now. Oh, and Catherine? No. Just no.
Came the voice of Abby over top of everyone. Everybody stops and looks at her, with some faces that of unease and the others a look of agreement.
I think it's no proper introduction, but you get the clear idea. Cute and clumsy over there is Julie.
Hi.
Like you said, bimbo's Catherine.
She gave no comment, just a wave and a wink.
And the nitwit over there's Vincent.
Abby explained, pointing at each of the employees, showing little emotion as always. Vincent's face stayed chilled, as if he didn't hear what she said. The boss had a look of satisfaction on his face, leaving Nicholas in, again, a state of utter confusion over what he had gotten himself into. It was late. The sun was setting over the city skyline, bathing the red and brass city in a radiant amber glow, shimmering off the metal frameworks for only a brief hour before the city was plunged into darkness. When then the night sky lit up, one by one, with stars and lights from the city's distant glow, as it twinkled in starlight and grew in beauty. As the night grew on, the workers headed up to their rooms, locking the doors and windows before they had to sleep. Nicholas felt excited, for this was just the first day, and if this is what it was like normally, then he couldn't wait to see what tomorrow might bring. He laid in bed that night and thought. As they slept and the city grew ever more quiet throughout the night as twilight hours drifted on, within the city's vast alleyways there runs a girl, huffing, trying to catch her breath, and not to be caught herself. She leans on a wall, breathing heavily, arms supporting her weight. The alley was quiet, nothing more than droplets of water into a puddle nearby, when the silence was abruptly broken by the sound of footsteps, not heavy and fierce like someone running, but slow and calm. She continued to flee, the alleyway closing in around her. Escape seemed hopeless, and then it was. The brick walls stood between her and life. Desperately she tried to climb, but to no avail, and then she heard them again. The footsteps, growing even closer. She stopped, back to the wall, fear grew even more present in her head, as they got closer until they stopped. She looked to her pursuer, stopped in front of her, confused, and then she realized. Relief flew over her, and then she uttered, "Oh, it's you," still relieving from her sudden emotion change. I thought it was that murderer that I'd read about, but I'm glad it was." The knife pierced through her stomach and up to her throat before she could finish. Her cold, lifeless face fell to the shoulder of her killer as her eyes dwindled till blank. The killer just held her on his shoulder and whispered, "Do not fret, young one, for you are now with God." The Events of a Bartender is an audiobook written and narrated by Nicholas Jobson, with voice acting accompanied from Fraser Vincent, Sarah Ray Jobson, and Neve O'Connor. The story is an adaptation of a written piece by the same name and author. If you would like to read more of the story, you can find it at wattpad.com, Nightrocks360 under The Events of a Bartender. Stay tuned for next week's adventure, but until then, stay classy, stay safe, and stay inventive, people. Goodbye.